Hey everyone, it's AVD, and it's so great to be back here on YouTube. Man, I've waited months to say these words, and well, it's great saying these again. Finally being able to, post something on this YouTube channel. And well, there's been a lot that's happened since May when I left, and one of the companies that's really stood out to me has been Apple. Because in my opinion, Apple has changed. And there are two main things that I've observed in Apple, two contrasting things. One good, one bad, and honestly I think these speak volumes of what Apple is trying to do right now, and I think this could play a huge role in their future. So, let's start off with the new MacBook Pros, shall we? For those of you who have no idea what a MacBook Pro is, this is basically Apple's highest-end laptop, which is geared towards creative professionals and people who need a lot of power in a very small form factor, which is nice and portable. So, this year's MacBook Pro has probably been one of the biggest steps taken by Apple. And well, to understand that, let's have a look at the predecessor of this year's MacBook Pro, which was the 2016 MacBook Pro. And also, to understand why that MacBook Pro needed a refresh this year, let's have a look at the 2015 MacBook Pro as well, both of which are now on screen. Now, on first glance, you wouldn't see anything out of the ordinary on the front, would you? That is until we turn on to the sides. Big difference, huh? Well, yes, because as you can clearly see, there are ports that are gone on the 2016 MacBook Pro. You see, in 2016, what Apple did to the MacBook Pro was basically take the 2015 MacBook Pro, remove all of the ports, and replace them with 4 USB-C connectors. Now, USB-C is another standard of USB, which is basically everything you use nowadays to plug, say, a thumb drive into your computer, or even this mic here, which I'm using to record this video. And well, Apple's reasoning for the change at the time was quite simple, actually. You see, USB-C is one of the most adaptable ports out there, because besides carrying power along with it, it can also be used to transfer data. Apple's 2015 MacBook Pros had a lot of important ports which are essential for people like pros to basically be able to do a variety of things on these machines. And basically, if we have a look at the first main omission, this was MagSafe. Now, MagSafe is probably one of the coolest pieces of tech I've seen from Apple, quite possibly ever, because this connector basically featured magnets on the end of it, which basically snapped onto the laptop, which also contained magnets in it. Now, what's the immediate benefit, you may be asking? Quite simple, actually. Well, you'd be charging over MagSafe. If you were to accidentally trip over your charging cable, which everyone does, trust me, I've done it about 500 times with mine, you'd be able to probably yank your machine out along with the cable, and if it had a hard drive in it, well, so long, I guess. This was very, very smart from Apple, because the second you have something that's magnetic, it can basically detach itself from the machine if you yank it too hard. So this was probably one of the biggest omissions from the 2016 version of the MacBook Pro, along with the HDMI and SD card readers. My goodness, were these massive omissions at the time, and they still are now, because basically everybody needs these ports, especially if you're a professional. If you're someone who takes photos a lot, you'll know how important SD cards are. And the convenience of having an SD card slot on the computer, just basically take the SD card and plop it into the computer and transfer all of your files, is unparalleled, basically. And well, we all know what the HDMI port is. Basically, this allows you to transfer a high-definition signal through a cable attached through the port, and this is quite useful in appliances such as, well, a projector, and especially if you have external displays and stuff like that. Also, if we have a look at the keyboard, there are two main changes here as well. Now, if we have a look at the top of the keyboard, you'll see a notable omission: the function keys. Where are they, you may ask? And well, the answer to that is in this weird screen thing that's called the touch bar. You see, the function row is probably the most important thing ever, because we all use it to control essential things like volume, screen brightness, and so on. And also, these function keys serve as shortcuts in various other applications. And well, what Apple did was basically take the function keys out and put a screen there, which they call the touch bar, which had all of these functions, so you could basically tap it to perform these functions, while also being able to, have these functions from other apps being laid out there. However, this was up to the developers to integrate these features into the app itself, because the functionality of the touch bar was not controlled by Apple. And this was very, very poorly integrated into macOS, which runs on the MacBooks. This basically went down as a lead balloon. No one really used the touch bar, and honestly, this was probably one of the biggest flops of the 2016 MacBook Pro. Now, if we have a look at this year's MacBook Pro, finally, Apple basically went back on all of the changes they'd made, while making the MacBook Pro a much better product for consumers to use. And honestly, this is a really, really good positive step from Apple. This company is infamous for often going at its user base saying, "You've often done that wrong." In fact, with the iPhone 4, there was this issue where if you tried to grip the phone like this around the antenna lines, which are basically essential for receiving signal, Apple's response at the time, "You're holding it wrong." And, well, this has marked such a stark change in attitude from a company that's honestly had a lot of pride when it comes to making decisions and sticking with those decisions. And I'm really happy that Apple is finally listening to the people who really use their products, and this is something that I really hope that they continue to do with further additions of other products like the iPhone, the iPad, and so on. But in my opinion, Apple's handling of the right to repair movement has been utter nonsense, to put it quite simply. Now, for a bit of background on right to repair, let me put this to you. When you buy a product from a company, you're supposed to own that product, right? You pay the money to own that product. You pay the money because you want to use that product, and you own the rights basically to do whatever you want to do with it. Right. Now, what happens if you break that product by accident? Now, there's several things like warranty, but assume that we didn't have something called warranty. You can always go to the manufacturer and ask them to fix the device for you. Or additionally, if, as is the case nowadays, people often go to third-party people. That is, people outside the manufacturer who can also do the same job of fixing it, but are often a lot cheaper than the manufacturer themselves, and provide just as good, if not better, service than them. So, Apple's stance on third-party repair has largely been the same one since day one. We don't want people going around and poking inside our phones, because we think people could injure themselves. And this is literally what Apple thinks. Now, there's been something that companies have been doing to stop this kind of third-party repair. This is something called serialization. To explain this to you, let's take an example of a Gmail account. So, if I had an account, I basically have my username and my password. Now, I can set any password I like, and as long as I don't type the same password in when I'm trying to log into my account, I'm blocked from doing so, right? Okay, so serialization of parts follows something very similar. Each part is assigned a serial number, and this is tied to the device. So whenever you replace that part with something that doesn't have the same serial number, the device basically says, that's not happening, and basically disables functionality of that component. Now, this gets really, really frustrating with Apple devices, because starting from the iPhone XS, if you perform a battery swap, you get this annoying pop-up at first which says, unable to verify whether this iPhone has a genuine Apple battery or not. Well, at first you don't find that there's too much that's been done to the functionality of your device, until and unless you go into settings, where you find out that something called battery health, which gives you the maximum operating capacity of the battery, is gone. And this is important because people need this percentage value to tell them when it's time to replace their batteries. And by withholding this, Apple is basically saying, either you come to us, or you're basically screwed. Now, the iPhone 13 makes this even more frustrating. If I take an iPhone 13 screen and I swap with the part that's literally from another iPhone 13, I get the same message, but of course it's for the display this time, and it disables a couple of important functionalities. The first one of these is True Tone, which allows the display to shift the color temperature, which is basically how warm or how cool the image is based on the ambient lighting conditions. And while this might not be a big deal for most people, I kinda like True Tone. Don't hate on me. The biggest change to functionality, which you'll definitely notice, however, is that if you swap the display with any other display, irrespective of it being Apple or not, you lose Face ID or Face Unlock, which is one of the most secure ways to unlock your phone. Having biometrics is just such a convenient way of getting into devices, and honestly, it is so infuriating to see Apple basically lock you out of using something that's essential to use your device. This is not something that's restricted to Apple, like I said. There are tractor companies that do this, and even medical companies that do this, and the scale of this problem is just growing with each day. You see, for when a big company like Apple does this, everyone else assumes, hey, we can do this as well. And you start seeing serialization of parts pop up everywhere else. And this is honestly something which I don't want to see, because at the end of the day, these things matter to us. And the second you start blocking functionality or blocking the ability of you being able to repair a device that you own, you no longer own the device. Anyways, that's a wrap. Thank you all so much for watching. Of course, it's a bit of a somber note to end this video on, but I really think it's important for us to understand the effects that this may have on, us owning tech products in the future. If you did enjoy this video, a like and sub to the channel would be massively appreciated, because I really spent a lot of time trying to refine the format and make this stuff easy to understand. And well, do let me know in the comment section down below if that's really what I managed to achieve with this. In terms of content for next month, do probably expect to see either a video or a live stream come out. It's probably going to cover this year as a whole in terms of tech, and probably a bunch of other stuff as well. Anyways, that's all I have for today, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.